You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again today. Just like any other day, we have another special guest on I Am Refocused Radio. We're going to talk to Tony Rambles, man. He is going to be talking to us not just about his life story, but what he does, man. He has his own podcast. He's doing big things with public speaking, and I just want to welcome him to the show. First of all, say how you doing, Tony?
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me on.
Good day.
Yes, sir, man. So, man, tell us a little bit about what you do and what you offer to the community.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a teacher. So no matter where I go, whether it's in podcasting, because I do have my own podcast, but I'm also a teacher by trade. I teach high school. So 14 to 18, sometimes 19, sometimes 20, unfortunately. They got to come see Mr. Franklin as I go by my government occupation. But I'm a teacher. I serve, at my church as well. I sing every Sunday, and that's just a few things that I do. I stop at my stop signs in my neighborhood. So that's part of how I serve my community as well.
I mean, you also do teach English to Chinese toddlers too. I think that's a little fun insight right there. But tell us, like, where you from? I know you got a hometown with Houston, Texas, and Detroit, Michigan, and you have roots in Houston, Texas as well.
Sure.
Tell us about your bringing up, man, and what inspired you to lead into the career that you're in right now.
So I'm from Detroit, Michigan, West Side, for all the Detroities out there. And I grew up doing a lot of moving because my parents are divorced, and that's actually how I made it to Houston, Texas. But we spent some time in Hartford, Connecticut as well, and other parts of Connecticut. So we kind of moved around so much that I had to learn how to adapt. I had to learn how to be the new kid in school almost every year. So that allowed me to be comfortable in situations where I had to meet new people all the time. So that's part of why I'm able to connect. That's one of my favorite things to do, is just to be able to connect with people, learn about their experiences, and then be able to share mine and find some common ground. And hopefully those connections go further. Like, you never know who you're talking to. So that connection could bloom into something special. And it could be just something where it's just a conversation with you and that person is awesome. It lasts for, 30 minutes or an hour or less. And that's it. Like, you may never see or talk to that person again, but just that short time to be able to connect. Those are the things that I live for. You mentioned me tutoring Chinese kids. So my first year as a teacher was actually in China. My wife and I moved there after I graduated college. So I was just looking for something different. I had worked in banking, and I worked in construction. So all of these experiences in life kind of led me to go, okay, let's try something different. Let's try something new. And living life as a broke college student with my wife, we had been married for 3 years. You go, okay, you want to travel, but traveling costs money. But if I can make money and travel, I think that's a good deal. So ended up taking a job there. We stayed for a year. It was an amazing experience, but that's what got me into being a school teacher. So once I came back from there after a year, I just jumped right in. I started as a substitute, and then I moved into full-time teaching once I got certified. But all these things kind of led to, okay, my voice is kind of my gift, right? And I live to teach. So podcasting was a natural progression. So that's when I started the Living Numbers podcast. And that's how I connected with you and got to be able to come onto this great show.
And that's awesome. So let's dive in that real quick, since you mentioned your podcast, the Living Numbers podcast that you do with Tony Rambles. What is your main type of style on the show, and what's some of the things you unpack on there?
Well, Shamaya, I like to bring people into those conversations that I talked about earlier. We're able to just connect with somebody and hit it off, and you never know where the conversation can go. That's much like how my podcast sounds and feels to my listeners. So to them, it's just me and Shamaya. We just kicking it. We're talking about his life and the things that you've done and the great stories that you have to offer. On the back end, obviously, me as the host, I've done tons of research and I know how to guide the conversation so that we're able to touch on a lot of different things and offer great value to listeners. So I always wanted to feel relaxed. I always wanted to feel like you're just kind of a fly on the wall or just another person in the chair and you're in on a conversation. But the gist of what I do is I interview people. So I find amazing people with amazing stories who've accomplished at least a little bit, and I bring them on and we just talk back and forth. And it's called the Living Numbers Podcast because I use numbers to transition from topic to topic. So a number could be anything. It could be a time, it could be a date, it could be an amount of something, a weight. I could say, man, our first number here is 630, and that is the time where me and Shamaya met and we had this amazing conversation. And so from there, we can take it anywhere, wherever my guests will feel comfortable going. So that's the gist of the podcast because I wanted to be able to talk about anything and everything with anyone, right? I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into a specific topic because I could easily do a sports podcast with no problem. But I wanted to be able to talk about things that are outside of the realm of sports. So that's how I came up with the numbers and the premise and the interviews. And that's where we are now. I'm about 55 episodes in, and it's been great.
No, that's what's up, man. That's cool because I mean that's what's about. You create that environment for the guests to shine, and that's why my podcast. Why when I have people on, my style is to get out the way, pitch it, and let them hit the home runs. Because I feel I started just a little bit of story on me real quick. I know it's about you, but real quick, we started on in the barbershop here in San Antonio. And to see it just grow and blossom to something crazy, it's like, man. And that's how it started. We just in the barbershop, just talking. You can hear people getting a haircut, the clippers going, and, a little noise in the background, people, conversating, whatever. We had refreshments and stuff. But that's kind of how it starts. It starts with those little acts that turns into something bigger than what you can ever dream of it to be. And speaking of that, you mentioned sports. You don't just like sports, man. You also have experience coaching. Tell us a little bit about that.
Wow, coaching is, I think it's such an up and down road when you have so many other things to do because coaching takes a lot of time. It is a huge time requirement, energy, emotional requirement. So coaching is always one of those kind of battles for me in my life because I have a wife, almost 10 years. I have a son who's 13 months old. So those things, I can't neglect that. But coaching has given me an opportunity, just another way to connect. I've always been a big sports guy, football, basketball, even baseball. I'm just tennis, because and then you look at a guy like Tiger Woods who changed golf forever. You got to at least follow a little bit, and the same thing with Venus and Serena. So you kind of become fans of the game. And what I coach is actually basketball, which I didn't play until after high school. That's the funny part where people go, well, did you play somewhere? Because I'm still pretty athletic. I like to get out there. And I coach girls. So, when they see me jumping up and touching rim and all that great stuff, they got questions. And I actually played football all through high school because I was a big fan of Barry Sanders and Jerry Rice. They were the greats as I came up, in the 90s and early 2000s. But what got me into basketball is when you graduate high school, nobody's playing tackle football outside. Like we all got to go to work tomorrow. So I got into basketball because you can just go to a court at any time, any day, especially in Houston. It's always hot. The weather doesn't really get too cold, not for long. Being in San Antonio, that 10 months out of the year, you can go outside and pretty much tip the ball up. So I got into coaching in the high school ranks once I started teaching, obviously. And I've been coaching girls basketball for the past 4 years. And last year, I just recently started coaching softball, which is an experience in itself because I don't have a ton of experience there. So it's been great and just another way to connect with young people and to stay active and have fun, right? Because if you're not having fun in life, I think you're doing it wrong.
And so that's cool. I'm glad I asked that because that's interesting. So you still are coaching to this day. And that really makes me think about your statement on your profile where I met you on Podmatch. Not trying to do a shameless plug, but that's how I met you. You say and you state, and you even said in this show how everywhere you go, you are a teacher and you try to add value to people in any way that you can. So unpack that for the audience. Why is it so important for you to add value in people's lives in any way that you can?
Well, the statement adding value, I think, deserves more context, right? So this is a great segue here because when I was a softball coach last year, I was the number 3, right? I was kind of the lowest on the totem, not kind of. I was definitely the lowest on the totem pole, but that's where I needed to be, right? I was able to drive the bus. I was kind of just a supporting role. If the 2 varsity coaches needed to go to a tournament, then, I can hang back. I'll be able to continue to have practice because if I'm not there, then practice can't happen because both the coaches are gone. So that was my value as a softball coach, was really just in a kind of third person supporting role. I was the Ant-Man of the Avengers, right? I was kind of the person just to bring up the rear. Now in basketball, my role is much more prevalent as far as game planning and scouting and a lot more hands-on with my players because basketball is more of my specialty. So the way I was able to add value was in a different role, a much larger role, but just as important as with softball. So I think you have to know where your expertise is, when you're the leader, when you need to be the follower, when you just need to support. And it's different. You got to kind of feel your way through it. And I think it's important to add value because what else are we on earth to do? Like if you're not adding value to people's lives, either you're adding or you're taking away. And I know every conversation, there's always going to feel like one or the other. Is somebody, people like to use this metaphor now, is someone filling up your cup or are they emptying your cup? Right. So I want to always be one of those people that fills people's cup up. And depending on the situation, the value may be different and how you add value may be different. But if you just try to find a way to add to people's lives, then I think people will appreciate you for that. And then in return, sometimes they add value to you, sometimes they don't. But that's not why I do it. I add it because that's who I am. That's the goal. Like right now, we just had our first 3 days of school. It's our first Friday, thank God. But there are new teachers on campus, whether they've been teaching for 10 years or 10 days. There are some things that they just don't know. So how can I help that person? Well, a 10-year teacher, they may not need me to share tactics or strategies. They may just need me to let them into the restroom because I got the keys. Or they may need me to tell them where the copy room is or where to go to the front office. These little things all add up, right? Because it just helps people's quality of life. Not a person that's been teaching for 10 days or a year or less or even 2 years or less. I think because after that, you kind of hit your stride, depending on what you teach and how long you teach it. Those people need more of those strategies and different creative ways to get students involved and active. So, like I said before, those are different examples, but how you add value just depends on you, your expertise, your experiences, and the context of the situation.
Once again, listen to Refocused Radio, talking to Tony Rambles. And man, another thing, fun fact, I don't think we haven't touched yet, but you mentioned about your parents' divorce, and that led you to Houston. But with the oil and gas industry, you actually you had experience working in that industry. Was that something that you wanted to do? Was something that you had to do? What's the story behind that?
You said working in which industry?
The oil and gas industry.
Oh man. So that is okay. So I graduated high school, and my dad and my stepmother, they worked in oil and gas doing shutdowns and turnarounds for anyone who's familiar. And you being from San Antonio, you may be. But they did that, and the money is good, right? We're talking minimum probably $1,000 a week, right? Depending on the job that you get, because it's third party. So there's contract work, but that's neither here nor there. I got into the industry because of them, because I didn't want to go to college right away. I was in this space where, yes, I'm a good student, right? I think I graduated maybe with a 3.3 through high school and even through college, but I was just tired of school. I needed a change of scenery. I needed to do something else that was not books and teachers and people telling you, what to do all the time and sit here, you can't go here. So I wanted to just get away from that part of life. And my dad was always like, hey, if you don't want to go to school, I can get you into oil and gas. You can make some decent money until you figure out what you want to do and what you want to be in life. So I took that route. I graduated high school in, I guess, May. And then by August, I was, on the next job because my dad had that much juice. Shout out to the dads out there. He had that much juice where he was able to get me onto, and this was like the job of the year, right? There are jobs that come up where people are, how it's like with movies, right? I'll use an analogy people can understand. If there's an Avengers movie coming out, right? People want to get on that movie because they know it's a guaranteed blockbuster, guaranteed money is going to be successful no matter what. The first job that I ever got in oil and gas was that movie, basically in our industry. So I was really spoiled coming into this great money, and we worked there from September through Christmas. By that time, I was like, all right, I'm ready to go home, right? We were in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So I took that job, and it was the best job I ever had in oil and gas, my very first one. And from there, it was just kind of a rocky road. It was up and down. Maybe you can get on a job, maybe you can't. Maybe you need another certification. And so maybe about 2 years or so of doing that and kind of riding that roller coaster, that's when I enrolled back in school and I went to University of Houston. And I've been on maybe a few oil and gas jobs since then, just that if it's the right situation, I'll go. But more often than not, I'm avoiding it. It's just not the life that I want.
And you mentioned being in college, you studied business administration. Was that something that you wanted to use to maybe start your own business? What was your reason for picking your major?
I had no real reason for picking a major at all. My friend was actually going to Devry University to get enrolled in school. So my friend, my brother, and we all went together. I was the ride. I usually drove everywhere when we were hanging out. So we went down there. My friend was enrolling. Me and my brother were sitting in I guess it's the faculty lounge, just waiting. And a lady came in there and she was like, so, what you guys doing in here? We were waiting on our buddy. He's getting enrolled in school. And she said, are you guys in school? We say no. Do you want to be in school? We say yes. Because at that time in my life, I just came off oil and gas. And I'm like, all right, it's time to go back to school. So we both enroll. And I'm the only person that actually ended up graduating. I don't remember how long they stayed in school, but I'm the only person that got a degree out of all three of us. Wasn't even there to actually get into school at the time. And I stuck with it. Now, how I got to business administration and marketing, I have no earthly idea. I couldn't even give you a made up answer. I knew I wanted a degree. I didn't really have any inkling of starting a business or owning a business, running anybody else's business. I just knew, okay, I have to get a degree. I guess business is good enough. So let's just go with that. If I was smart, I would have got it in tech. But right, the life choices that we make.
I mean, that's what makes our story unique. And I mean, for you to be able to live in China and teach English and coaching and, work in oil gas industry, I mean, that's a very abstract, awesome adventure, is what I would put it. Because how many people can say they done half of that? I mean, seriously. When you talk about working, you talk about it like, man, this is just something I get to do. It doesn't sound like it's a drag, like, oh, I got to do this. Because you've done so many things. How many jobs have you actually, different types of jobs have you had that we haven't covered?
As you were talking, I was hoping that I would be able to expand, right? Because I actually had an episode on my podcast with my brother where we talked about employment, right? Because we kind of went on the same track. We both went to Mississippi together. It was me, him, and my dad. So we were talking about having jobs and whatnot. I've had about 20 different jobs. I know that's a ridiculous number. Well, I guess I'll say I've worked for 20 different companies in a myriad of industries. So I mentioned oil and gas. I already mentioned education. But I've also worked in like a warehouse doing, it's basically like you press a button, the metal bends, and then, on to the next piece of metal. I did that for maybe 3 weeks. I was like, I'm out of here, overnight shift. I worked in, I would say a lot of the fun times that I've had were either working in retail, where I worked at Forever 21 for 2.5 years. That's always one where people go, what? Wait, huh?
Yeah, I was about to say, what?
They wouldn't make, yeah. So I worked there, and our store actually didn't have men's clothing. So it was always just kind of a weird one to bring up. But man, I had so much fun there because of the people that I worked with. And from there, because they wouldn't make me a manager, I went to eye masters and sold eyeglasses. And that's where I got the first two, I would guess, say managers or bosses that really kind of showed they made me feel like I had potential, like to kind of do more. They really show interest in allowing me to grow in their industry. So Julia Lynn's, I'll never forget her. It was Amy and Doris. They came in. They were like under the store manager. These two people, retail supervisor and something else. They came into Forever 21. They asked, like, do you like working here? I said, I mean, it's cool, but my options are open, because at this time I had applied to be a store manager. We had ran through store managers, or assistant managers rather, and they just wouldn't give me a shot. Like, I couldn't buy a shot. And so I'm like, all right, I'm looking around here. So, but they said, okay, come down, let's do an interview, and we'll see what we can do. So I went down there and I met with the store manager, and I just told her up front, I said, I'm looking to expand my role. I don't want to just be, a cashier or just sell glasses. I want to be into management. I want to move up. And she was like, all right, come in. You do your thing for, 6 months or so. We'll see what we can do for you. And it was really just like that. Boom. And I did my thing. I eventually became a assistant manager. And man, I really remember those times very fondly. Also working in the food industry, waiting tables. Man, I had so much fun waiting tables because of the people that I worked with. You have and I don't know how old you are, but sometimes you go to work, Shamaya, and you have these people that become like work moms, or I wouldn't call nobody a work dad. That's weird. But you have a work mom where you have these, where you have somebody that's much older than you, but they just kind of take you under their wing and they just do whatever they can. They pour into you, right? They add value. Here we go again. Joyce was one of those people. She was a school teacher. Rox, short for Roxanne, she was one of those people. Brenda tried to get me to date her daughter. she had this voice like, hey, Tony, go ahead and give me some of those lemons. Her voice was real raspy like that. Raspy. Everybody loved Brenda. Yeah, man. But some of my funnest times were working in food and beverage and working in retail. Now, I definitely wouldn't go back to those industries, but a lot of great people, a lot of good times.
Once again, listen on Refocused Radio, talking to Tony Rambles. And man, I mean, everything you said just ties everything all together, because we know about you enough that you love to educate people, and not just, educate them, but to add value in their lives, everywhere you're teaching. And everything you're saying about these jobs, it's like all these different experiences, all these different co-workers, different settings, different environments. You still manage to make the best of every situation because that's your passion. Your passion, what I'm hearing, is you like trying new things that are different because it has a new experience. And let me know if that's not right, but I'll let you talk to that.
It's not always just trying something new, but I'm in something until I'm out of it, right? So I'm a teacher right now and I'm a coach and I'm locked in. But when I decide it's time to move on, or I guess through, I'm a believing man. So through, prayer and kind of looking at how things are moving around me, when I know like it's time to move on, it's time to do something different, then I just do it. Like I'm not afraid to change industries or change whatever it is that's going on, because I feel like I'm always trying to get better. And I always feel like God is not going to lead me down the wrong way. So if I know that it's the right thing to do, it's full steam ahead, right? There's no time to waste, right? So that's kind of how I do it, man. I never knew I would be going to China. I never knew I would become a teacher. I never knew I would work, selling eyeglasses. I'm just always looking for the opportunities, the right situation, and the right people. And when those things come along, you just got to take a hard look at your life and go, okay, have I maxed out my potential here? Is there more to do? Can I get better? Or will this next move be a better opportunity for me to expand my role, to grow as a person, to grow as a professional? So it's never like I'm never just kind of looking for something new, but I'm not closed off to it either, because I know opportunities can come in all shapes and sizes and different. I never thought I would have a podcast. I never thought that, but here we are.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And on the outside looking in, it does look like you like new things, but I get a better understanding of what you're saying. And that's even more clear, because not everybody is always able to, I wouldn't say able, willing to commit to a new chapter that they're trying to explore or pursue. But you have pursued a lot of things and you've been very successful in doing so. As we wrap up, first and foremost, once again, listen to Refocused Radio, talking to Tony Rambles. You can follow him on Twitter at _Tony Rambles _. And he also has a podcast that, man, you want to check it out. It sounds very interesting. The Living Numbers Podcast with Tony Rambles. When people want to connect with you online, someone listening right now, I'm like, man, this is a cool guy. I want him on my show. I just want to, explore, and chop it up with him. What's the best way that they can contact you?
You can find me on Instagram at The Living Numbers Podcast, TikTok, The Living Numbers Podcast, Facebook as well. Pretty much on all of those, trying to connect. And you mentioned my Twitter. I can't use The Living Numbers Podcast because it's too long, but _ Tony Rambles _ Those are the ways that you can get in touch with me. But also my podcast is on YouTube. So that's also a place, The Living Numbers Podcast. You can find it there.
Awesome, man. Well, you mentioned earlier in the show, too, that you are a person of faith. Someone listening to this right now, I mean, you can't help but be inspired. I mean, you hear it from someone who dove into some, different experiences, different jobs, different professions, but you've been committed to being successful at different things, different seasons and different opportunities. Someone listen right now, maybe they feel like, man, shoot, I feel like I'm stuck. What general advice would you give to someone who has a situation where they just are too scared to actually take action to commit to their dreams and goals?
Well, my first thing is always going to be God related for me and for other believers. But if you have people who are like, man, I don't believe in all that stuff, or hey, give me like something I can actually do, like give me some actionable steps. I got something for you too, because I'm that same way. Even as a believer, there are things that like you have to do stuff. You can't just sit and pray and sit on your hands. But we're not going to get into that conversation right now. I would say find out what step one is. Whatever step one is, that could be submitting an application. That may be doing research. That may be, just walking outside. Whatever step one is, figure out what step one is for the goal that you have in mind and go from there. Once you complete step one, what's step two, right? Just make it bite-sized pieces so that you don't get overwhelmed. Figure out step one and then complete step one, even if it takes you a day, a year, 2 years. Hopefully these things don't take that long, but you never know each person's situation. Figure out step one, destroy step one, tackle step one, and then move on to step two.
Awesome, man. Been listening to Refocused Radio and talking to Tony Rambles, man. Hit him up on Twitter at _Tony Rambles _ and you can listen to his cool podcast, the Living Numbers podcast with Tony Rambles. I want to say thank you. Take your time in your schedule, man, for talking to I Am Refocused Radio.
Thanks for having me on, Shemaiah. I appreciate it, and hopefully I added value to you and your listeners.